Carmela Rose, a nurse at a military hospital, seemed unremarkable in her modest appearance. Her shyness, downcast eyes, and deliberately casual demeanor served as the perfect cover. Arrogant doctors, accustomed to their own grandeur, condescendingly ignored her, as if she were incompetent and hardly worthy of their attention. But one day, when a wounded and delirious Special Forces admiral was brought into the emergency room, the situation changed dramatically. He went berserk, pushing away anyone who tried to help him, refusing treatment, and dying before everyone's eyes. At that critical moment, Carmela whispered a code name she shouldn't have known. At that moment, the most dangerous man in the room froze, recognizing in the voice the elusive presence of someone who, by all rights, no longer existed. Little did the doctors know that behind the clumsy nurse's facade lurked a past capable of bringing them all to their knees. And the admiral was soon to discover that the woman on whom his life now depended was, in fact, a legend he had believed had died in battle. If you enjoy stories of hidden heroes, military secrets, and shocking revelations, like and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Leave a comment if you think you can guess Carmela's true identity before the big reveal. The emergency department at Naval Medical Center San Diego ran like a well-oiled machine until it began to malfunction. Carmela Rose stood at the nurse's station. Her light brown hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, with a few strands escaping, framing her face. Her medium-sized blue scrubs hung loosely on her petite 5'4" frame, deliberately concealing the toned, athletic build beneath. Her blue-gray eyes were downcast, focused on the medicine tray that trembled in her hands. "Rose," Dr. Marcus Thorne's voice cut through the silence of the emergency room like a whip. "How many times do I have to tell you? The IV is in your left arm for pre-op preparation. To the left. Can you handle it yourself, or should I find someone more competent?" Carmela winced, her shoulders instinctively hunching. "Yes, doctor. I'm sorry, doctor." Thorne was 36 years old. Tall and trim thanks to his passion for CrossFit, he wore his white coat like a crown. His perfectly coiffed dark hair caught the fluorescent lights as he turned to the resident next to him. "This is what happens when you lower standards. You get nurses who can't handle basic protocols." The resident, Dr. Sarah Chen, laughed appropriately. She'd quickly learned that agreeing with Thorne was a career move. "Maybe she should stick to changing bedpans," Chen suggested. Carmela's hands trembled more intensely as she picked up the tray. A thin scar above her left eyebrow, usually hidden by her hair, gleamed briefly in the light. Small scars from shrapnel dotted the backs of her hands, barely noticeable unless you looked closely. But no one ever looked closely at Carmela Rose. She was invisible. That was the whole point. "Rose, you're keeping the patient waiting," Thorne barked, gesturing impatiently. "Move." Carmela hurried toward room 3, her head down, her steps short and hesitant. She felt the other staff's gazes on her, a mixture of pity and contempt. An incompetent nurse, somehow certified, but clearly not a high-octane military hospital. She had been working at the Naval Medical Center for 8 months. 8 months of deliberate mistakes, shaking hands, and swallowed pride. 8 months of being who she needed to be. Forgettable. When she entered room 3, a patient, a young sailor with appendicitis, gave her a sympathetic smile. "Tough day." "Every day," Carmela said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She inserted the IV needle, her hands seeming to shake, but she found a vein on the first try. Muscle memory held true, even when everything else was lying. The sailor didn't notice. No one ever noticed. The emergency room doors swung open with a gust of hot California air and chaos. "Move, move, move!" 4 Marines rushed in, carrying a stretcher at top speed. The man on the stretcher was massive, at least 6 feet 5 inches tall, probably 260 pounds of solid muscle despite his age. His uniform was torn, soaked in blood, and his face was contorted with anger and pain. "Three-star Admiral," the lead Marine shouted. "Admiral James Hawthorne, multiple gunshot wounds to the chest and abdomen. His blood pressure is dropping. He's violent. We haven't been able to sedate him." Controlled chaos descended on the emergency room. Dr. Thorne abandoned his resident and raced to Trauma Room 1. "Roll him in here. Someone get the surgeons. I need 4 units of blood now." Carmela pressed herself against the wall of the hallway, watching. Her gray-blue eyes, usually avoiding direct gaze, suddenly tracked his every movement with laser-like precision. She scanned the Admiral's body language, the nature of his wounds, the way his hands moved, even as blood spurted from his chest. He wasn't just being violent. He was being tactical. "Hold him down," Thorne ordered as the Admiral was transferred to the trauma bed. 5 medical personnel struggled to restrain him. It was like trying to restrain a wounded grizzly bear. Admiral Hawthorne's eyes were wild, his pupils dilated. He didn't see a hospital. He saw something else entirely. "Ambush," he roared, his voice like gravel. "Incoming missile at 12 o'clock. Take cover." He swung his massive fist, hitting the orderly in the chest and sending the man flying toward the medical cart. Medical equipment shattered across the floor in a cacophony of metal and plastic. "Hold him down!" Thorne shouted, backing away. "Leather straps now." The Admiral grabbed the nurse's wrist, not with force, but with military efficiency. He twisted, spun, and suddenly the nurse was on the ground, and the Admiral had somehow escaped the 2 Marines' grasp. Blood splattered onto the pristine white tiles. "Oh my God, he's going to bleed out," Dr. Chen screamed. "Someone stun him." "I tried," the Marine yelled back, holding up the empty syringe. "He burned through 10 milliliters of sedative like it was nothing." The Admiral rolled off the bunk, hitting the floor hard. He immediately ran his hands over his chest, searching for gear that wasn't there. "Comms check," he gasped. "I need evac. Position compromised." He checked angles, calculated trajectories, his training trumping the fact that he was dying. Security burst through the doors, 4 armed guards in tactical gear. "Weapons down, sir," the lead guard ordered, placing his hand on his holster. "Admiral, you need to lower your weapons." Hawthorne grabbed the metal IV pole, swinging it in a defensive arc. "Stand back, that's an order." His voice carried commanding authority even through the delirium. "I will not be captured." The security team attempted to move around him. The Admiral, despite 3 bullet wounds to his torso and catastrophic blood loss, instantly read their movements. He hurled the IV pole like a spear, scattering them, then assumed a fighting stance that would have been impressive for a perfectly healthy man. For a dying 60-year-old, it was terrifying. "He's a psychopath," Dr. Thorne said from behind the overturned cart he was using as cover. "We need to tranquilize him. Give me 200 milliliters of propofol or an injection. That dose will kill him," Dr. Chen countered. "If we don't stop him, he'll kill someone else first." Carmela Rose stood in the doorway, forgotten. Her trembling hands had completely stilled. Her posture had shifted on a microscopic level, her shoulders squared, her weight balanced. She watched the Admiral's movements, reading them like a language only she understood. He wasn't fighting to hurt anyone. He was fighting for survival in the face of a threat that existed only in his warped mind. A classic combat stress response, brought on by catastrophic trauma. His brain reverted to the moment of injury. Probably an ambush. Probably recent. Probably classified. The security team was approaching. Their batons were drawn. If they hit him in this state, they would escalate the situation. He would kill someone, or they would kill him. Carmela made her decision. She stepped into Trauma Room 1. "Rose, get out," Thorne shouted. "That's an order." She ignored him. Slowly, deliberately, she approached the Admiral. Her hands were open, empty, non-threatening. She kept her body language submissive, but her eyes were locked on his with an intensity that didn't match the rest of her performance. "Admiral Hawthorne," she said quietly. Her voice cut through the chaos with unexpected clarity. The Admiral's head snapped toward her. He was swaying, his face pale from blood loss. "Stay away," he growled. But there was less confidence in his voice. He was confused. She didn't move like the others. She wasn't afraid. "Sir," Carmela said, taking another step. "You are not in danger. You are safe." "Liar," he spat. "Enemies on all sides." "Negative," Carmela interrupted, her voice changing subtly. The shy nurse had vanished. Her voice became clear, military, authoritative. "Threat assessment complete. No enemies present." "You're in a hospital, sir. Naval Medical Center, San Diego. You're on United States soil." The Admiral blinked, his gaze focusing on her for the first time. He saw the blue suit, the hospital identification, but he also saw something else. The way she stood, the way she moved, the utter lack of fear in her eyes. "Who?" he began, then faltered. His knees buckled. Carmela covered the distance in 2 quick strides, catching him before he hit the ground. She was incredibly strong for such a small man, controlling his fall with practiced efficiency. "Easy, Admiral," she said, her voice soft again, but with steel beneath it. "I've got you, but you need to let us work. You're bleeding." I can't trust," he muttered, his consciousness fading. And then Carmela leaned close to his ear and whispered 4 words that no one else in the room could hear. "Hawkeye, this is Valkyrie." The Admiral's eyes widened, his entire body tensed, every muscle frozen. He looked at her face, truly seeing her for the first time, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to something bordering on disbelief. "Valkyrie," he breathed, his voice barely audible. You're dead." "They said so," Carmela whispered, a shadow of a smile playing on her lips. "Kandahar, 2019. Rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. Now remove your weapon, Hawkeye. This is a direct order from your guardian angel." The Admiral's body went limp in her arms. Not unconscious, but surrendered. The fight drained from him instantly, replaced by a trust older and deeper than the wounds that had tried to kill him. "Valkyrie," he whispered again, his hand reaching up to touch her face as if to make sure she was real. His fingers trembled as they traced the thin scar above her left eyebrow. "Legend, you are real." "Lie down, Admiral," Carmela said softly, carefully lowering him back onto the trauma bed the Marines were hastily clearing. "Let us save your life. You will have a briefing for me later." "Yes, madam," the Admiral said. And then his eyes rolled back in his head and he lost consciousness. The entire emergency room fell silent. Dr. Thorne froze, his mouth hanging open. Dr. Chen looked as if she'd seen a ghost. The security team lowered their weapons. They stared at the tiny nurse who had just accomplished what 6 trained men had failed to do. Carmela turned to meet their gaze, and for just a heartbeat, they saw something in her eyes that made everyone in the room involuntarily take a step back. It wasn't anger. It wasn't a threat. It was absolute, complete competence that without a word redefined the hierarchy in the room. Then she blinked, and the trembling, shy nurse reappeared. "Someone should probably start an IV," she stammered, her hands shaking again as she reached for the supplies. He lost a lot of blood." Dr. Thorne found his voice. "How did you—" "I don't know," Carmela quickly interrupted, avoiding his gaze. I talked to him. He calmed down. Can we save him, please?" She was already at work, her trembling hands somehow inserting an 18-gauge intravenous line on the first try, drawing blood for type and RH status, assessing the wounds with a speed that seemed at odds with her obvious nervousness. Dr. Thorne looked at her, suspicion flickering across his face. But the Admiral was dying, and questions could wait. "Everyone get into position," he barked. "Chen, insert a central venous line. I should have a chest tube ready." "Rose, hang up the blood when it arrives." "Yes, doctor," Carmela whispered, lowering her head again, but as she retreated back into her carefully constructed masquerade, one of the guards, a former Army Ranger named Davis, stood in the doorway and squinted at her. He heard what she said, not her call signs. He was too far away to make it out, but he heard her voice change. He saw her move. He saw the 5'4" nurse maneuver the 6'5" Admiral, as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Davis pulled out his phone and discreetly snapped a photo of her hospital ID. Something was wrong with Nurse Carmela Rose, and he was going to find out what. Admiral James Hawthorne miraculously survived surgery. Doctor. Thorne spent 4 hours repairing punctured intestines, a damaged renal artery, and removing 3 7.62 caliber bullets that had somehow missed each vital organ by millimeters. It was surgical skill combined with incredible luck. Or maybe not. Maybe someone was protecting him. Carmela Rose stood in the corner of the operating room throughout the entire procedure, handing over instruments when asked, keeping her eyes downcast and saying nothing. Twice. When the Admiral's blood pressure dropped and Dr. Thorne hesitated, Carmela quietly adjusted the anesthesia and vasopressor doses without being asked. Dr. Chen noticed. She didn't say anything, but she noticed. But the Admiral had been transferred to the Surgical Wing's Intensive Care Unit, Level 3, a secure floor reserved for high-ranking military personnel. 2 armed Marines stood at his door. A third sat in the room, monitoring the monitors. Carmela had been assigned as his primary nurse for the night shift. Dr. Thorne had made the assignment personally, though his reasons were unclear. Perhaps he wanted to see if she would crack under the pressure. Perhaps he was testing her. Or perhaps he simply didn't want to waste a competent nurse on what he assumed would be simple post-operative monitoring. "Keep him sedated," Thorne ordered, looking over the chart at the nurses' station. "No visitors except authorized command personnel. If he wakes up in a state of agitation again, call me immediately. Do not interact with him alone." "Yes, doctor," Carmela whispered, taking the chart with trembling hands. Thorne narrowed his eyes at her. "Rose, what you did in the ER today? I just talked to him." She interrupted quickly. "I didn't do anything special." "You called him by his name. You used his rank. How did you know who he was?" Carmela's face flushed. "The Marines. They said that when they brought him in. I remembered. It was a lie." The Marines said that, but Carmela knew who Admiral James Hawthorne was from the moment she saw his face. She'd known him for 15 years, though he didn't remember ever meeting her. At least not as Carmela Rose. Thorne didn't look convinced, but he let go. "Just watch him. And Rose, don't touch anything you don't have the right to." "Yes, doctor." After Thorne left, Dr. Chen lingered at her post. She opened Carmela's file on the computer, poring over it. Carmela Rose, 32, graduated from a middling school in Nevada. Average grades, no military service, no previous hospital experience before the Naval Medical Center. References checked, but they were generic. Former faculty members who barely remembered her. It was a completely unremarkable case. Too unremarkable. Chen closed the file and glanced toward the intensive care unit where Carmela had disappeared. Something was wrong. The way the nurse moved in the trauma room, the way she controlled the Admiral, the way her hands suddenly stopped shaking as she inserted the IV line. "Dr. Chen," a voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Davis, the security guard from the previous day. "Can I ask you something about Nurse Rose?" Chen's eyes sharpened. "What about her? How long has she worked here?" 8 months. "Why?" Davis shifted awkwardly. "I've been a security guard here for 3 years. I've seen plenty of nurses handle aggressive patients. But what she did today? He shook his head. That wasn't nursing. That was tactical de-escalation. Military level. You think she has a record? I don't think someone with those skills just happens to be a mediocre nurse, Davis said carefully. I checked her name in the VA database. Nothing. Social Security is good, credit is clean, but it's all very recent. Nothing before 2019. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying she's using a false identity? I'm saying you need to ask her the right questions, Davis replied. Because Admiral Hawthorne recognized her. I saw his face. He knew her. Inside the intensive care unit, Carmela stood by the Admiral's bed, checking his vital signs. A Marine sat in the corner, watching her with the intensity of someone trained to spot threats. The Admiral's face was pale, his breathing supported by supplemental oxygen. Intravenous lines were inserted into both arms. A chest drain pumped bloody fluid into a collection chamber, and a Foley bag hung on the bed railing, measuring urine output. Carmela's trembling hands moved over the equipment, checking connections, adjusting the flow rate. But her eyes scanned his wounds with a precision unrelated to basic nursing. Entry wounds, center of mass, tight grouping, professional marksman. The bullets tumbled after impact, creating maximum internal damage but somehow missing the aorta and inferior vena cava. The Admiral must be dead. Someone was very lucky or very unlucky depending on what secrets he was keeping. Nurse, the Marine's voice was sharp. Carmela winced, her submissive posture instantly snapping back into place. Yes, you were looking at him. I was just checking his breathing, she stuttered, making sure the oxygen flow was adequate. The Marine didn't look convinced. What did you tell him in the emergency room? I saw you lean over and whisper something. What was that? Carmela's heart pounded against her ribs. I just told him he was safe, that's all. He called you something. A name? What was it? I don't know what you're talking about, Carmela lied, her voice barely audible. He was delirious. He said a lot of things. The Marine stood up, taking a step toward her. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, muscular and intimidating. Madam, with respect, I have been in personal security for 8 years. I know when someone is lying. Carmela backed toward the door, her eyes wide, her body language screaming vulnerability. I'm not lying. I don't know anything. I'm just a nurse. Please, I need to check on the other patients. Suddenly, the heart monitor alarm blared. Both Carmela and the Marine turned sharply toward the bed. Admiral Corton's body spasmed, his back arched against the mattress, his teeth clenched. The monitor showed a heart rate of 180 and above. Code Blue, the Marine shouted, rushing to the emergency button. But Carmela was already moving. She didn't run for help. She didn't freeze in panic. She crossed the room in 3 strides, her trembling gone, her movements suddenly smooth and precise. She grabbed the Admiral's jaw, turning his head to prevent aspiration. With her other hand, she slammed the emergency button. VAC, she shouted, reading the monitor. He's in critical condition. Bring a resuscitation cart. The Marine looked at her. Gone was the frightened, stuttering nurse of the previous 10 seconds. This woman had a commanding presence. Now, Carmela roared, and the Marine ran. The code response team burst through the door 30 seconds later. Dr. Chen led the way, followed by 2 nurses and a respiratory therapist. They found Carmela performing CPR with perfect precision. Her fragile body generated enough force that with each push, the Admiral's entire body was compressed. How long? Dr. Chen demanded, taking a position at the head of the bed. 45 seconds, Carmela said, continuing the compressions. VTAC has worsened to VIB, no pulse. Her hands, as if on invisible command, began performing a series of chest compressions at a rate of 110 beats per minute. The depth of penetration was approximately 2 inches. Dr. Chen blinked. This was absolutely precise protocol. Perfect rhythm, perfect depth, perfect terminology. This was no ordinary nurse standing before her. This was a specialist with advanced cardiovascular resuscitation training. "Charge to 200, Dr. Chen ordered. "Everyone back off." Carmela stepped back. The shock had passed. The Admiral's body shuddered. The monitor continued to show ongoing ventricular fibrillation. "Resume compressions," Chen commanded. "Charge to 300. Administer 1 milligram of epinephrine." Carmela began compressions again. But as she worked, Dr. Chen noticed something that made her blood run cold. Carmela's hands weren't just doing compressions. Between cycles, in the brief pauses, her fingers were probing the Admiral's chest, exploring the ribs, testing something. "Rose, what are you doing?" Chen asked sharply. "Broken rib?" "Left side, ribs 7 through 8, Carmela replied calmly and clinically. I felt crepitus. If we continue compressions at this angle, we'll drive the fracture into his lung. We need to shift his hand position, medially 2 centimeters. Dr. Chen stared at her. A mediocre nurse wouldn't have checked ribs for fractures during CPR. A mediocre nurse wouldn't have known the term crepitus. A mediocre nurse wouldn't have been smart enough to adjust the compressions to prevent a pneumothorax. "How did you?" Chen began. "Shock," Carmela interrupted, stepping back. Now Chen delivered a second shock. This time the monitor showed a rhythm. Slow, irregular, but still a rhythm. "Sinus bradycardia," Carmela announced. "Heart rate 45. Administer atropine 0.5 milligrams. "I didn't ask you," Chen began, but then stopped. Because Carmela was right. This was exactly what was needed. Chen administered atropine. The Admiral's heart rate rose to 70. Stable. His chest rose and fell with each artificial breath from the ventilator. The room collectively exhaled. "He's stable," Dr. Chen said, looking at the monitor. "Pulse is steady. Blood pressure is 110/70. He's back." Carmela stepped away from the bed, and as she did, the transformation reversed. Her shoulders hunched. Her hands began to shake. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have. I just reacted." Dr. Chen grabbed her arm. "Rose, look at me." Carmela didn't look up. "Look at me." Carmela slowly looked up. Her eyes were wide and fearful, a perfect reflection of the terrified nurse who had just performed the first CPR. But Dr. Chen saw the truth. For 60 seconds, this woman directed the resuscitation with the precision of an intensive care specialist. "Who are you?" Chen asked quietly. "I'm just a nurse," Carmela whispered. Before Carmela could respond, a faint voice came from the bed. "Valkyrie." Everyone turned. Admiral Hawthorne's eyes were half open, unfocused, but he was looking straight at Carmela. "Valkyrie," he repeated, his voice barely audible through the oxygen mask. "Kandahar, you saved 12 men." Dr. Chen's grip on Carmela's arm tightened. "What is he talking about?" "He's delirious," Carmela said quickly. "Post-cardiac confusion syndrome." "This is fine." "You're our guardian angel," the Admiral muttered, weakly extending his hand toward her. "They said you were dead, but here you are." "How?" His eyes rolled back in his head, unconsciousness taking hold again. Silence fell over the room. Dr. Chen released Carmela's hand and stepped back. "Nurse Rose, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. But this is not a request. Go home. Don't come back until we speak with HR and security." Carmela's face went pale. "Dr. Chen, please, I need this job." "Then you'll answer some questions," Chen said coldly. "Because right now I don't know whether you're a hero or a menace. And until I find out, you're not touching another patient in this hospital." Carmela froze for a moment, then nodded. She headed for the door, head down, shoulders hunched. But as she passed the Marine guard, he noticed something that made him reach for the radio. The thin scar above her left eyebrow, the small shrapnel marks on her arms, The way she moved, even in defeat. Her weight balanced, always aware of her exits. "Control, this is Davis," he said quietly into the radio. "I need a background check. Priority. Subject is Carmela Rose, nurse. I think we have an infiltrator." Carmela Rose didn't go home. She went to the hospital parking lot, got into her battered Honda Civic, and sat in the dark, thinking this was bad. She'd been exposed, not completely, but enough for questions to be asked. Questions she couldn't answer without completely giving away her cover. She pulled a burner phone from under the driver's seat and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. It rang once. "Valkyrie." The voice on the other end was clear. "Military female. You are not to contact us unless I am compromised." "The Admiral recognized me," Carmela said quietly. "He gave my call sign in front of witnesses." There was silence on the line. Then, "Evacuation protocol?" "Not yet. He's still in critical condition. If I leave now, they'll realize something's wrong, and whoever shot him will finish him off." "This is not your mission." "Now it's mine," Carmela said firmly. "He wasn't shot by accident. 3 shots. In the center of the body. A professional gang. Someone wanted to kill him, and I'm the only one in this hospital who can keep him alive long enough to find out why." Another pause. "You're requesting immediate authorization. I'm asking for 24 hours. If I can't stabilize the situation by then, I'll disappear. But Hawkeye has information, something worth killing the Admiral for." "Valkyrie, your legend is more important than one person." "He's not just one person," Carmela said, her voice hardening. "He's the commander of Naval Special Operations Command. If someone is hunting SEALs at the command level, we need to know who and why." The voice on the other end said, 24 hours, then we will terminate your identity and transfer you elsewhere. Understood." "Understood." The line is dead. Carmela sat in the darkness of her car, staring at the concrete wall in front of her. 24 hours. She had 24 hours to figure out who wanted to kill Admiral Hawthorne, keep him alive, and do it all without revealing that Nurse Carmela Rose was actually Lieutenant Commander Carmela Torres, a former Dev Group operator presumed killed in action in Kandahar in 2019. No pressure. Her burner phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. "Video surveillance from the emergency room is being reviewed. You have a watch." Carmela cursed. Of course they were reviewing the footage. They saw her whisper to the Admiral. They saw her move. They saw everything. She started the car and drove, not home, but to an all-night cafe 3 miles from the hospital. She needed to think. She needed a plan. At the cafe, she ordered coffee and sat in a corner booth where she could watch the door. Old habits. She took out a small notebook and began writing, not in English, but in the tactical shorthand she'd developed over years of serving on teams. If anyone found the notebook, it would look like gibberish. Threat assessment. The Admiral was shot by a professional. 3 shots of caliber 7.62. Sniper. Killed at close range. Time. Shots fired 6 hours before arriving at the hospital. Where was he? Why didn't they finish him off? He was left alive on purpose. They wanted him to talk first. Hospital security has been compromised. Inner work. Dr. Chen is suspicious. Security guard Davis is actively investigating. There is CCTV footage from the emergency room. The Admiral knows the real identity. He will speak when he regains consciousness. Options. Disappear now. Safest for the legend. Leaves the Admiral vulnerable. Stay and protect. Risks exposure. Protects the asset. Eliminate the threat before evacuation. Requires identification of the shooter. Carmela circled the third option. She needed to know who had shot the Admiral, and she had a feeling he knew exactly who it was. It had been a long night. Carmela's hand instinctively went to her belt before she remembered she was unarmed. She looked up. It was Davis, the security guard from the hospital. He sat down in the booth across from her without an invitation, his eyes hard and appraising. "How did you find me?" Carmela asked, her voice quiet and frightened. The timid nurse returned. "I followed you out of the hospital," Davis said bluntly. "You're not very good at counter-surveillance for someone you claim is just a nurse." Carmela's heart began to beat faster. "I don't know what—" "Stop this farce," Davis interrupted. "I was in the Army Rangers, 75th Regiment. I worked with JSOC operators. I know how they move. I know how they talk. And I know you're not some mediocre nurse who barely passed her certification." Carmela didn't respond. She assessed him carefully. 6 feet 2 inches tall, approximately 220 pounds, athletic build visible beneath the security uniform. Wedding ring, age 42, according to the file she'd memorized when she first arrived at the hospital. Honorable discharge, Purple Heart, Bronze Star, soldier, not the enemy. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "The truth," Davis said. "Because Admiral Hawthorne is in my hospital, on my watch. And today someone tried to kill him, and the only person who could calm him down, the only person he trusts, is a nurse who shouldn't exist." "I exist," Carmela said softly. "I'm sitting here." "Carmela Rose exists," Davis corrected. "But who are you, really?" Before she could respond, her burner phone vibrated again. She glanced at it. The message made her blood run cold. "Second attempt inevitable. Hawthorne compromised. Asset in hospital." Carmela stood up abruptly. "I need to get back." "Where?" "To the hospital. Someone's going to try to kill him again tonight." Davis stood up with her. "How do you know?" "Because that's what I would do," Carmela said, and for the first time, the mask slipped completely. Her voice became hard, tactical, commanding. "The first attempt failed. He's vulnerable in the ICU, limited security. If I were in charge, I'd strike within the next 6 hours before he regained consciousness and began to speak." Davis stared at her. This wasn't a trembling nurse. This was a warrior. "Who are you?" he asked again. Carmela looked him in the eye. She had made a decision. She didn't have time to act alone, and she needed someone inside the hospital who understood what was happening. "My name is Commander Carmela Torres," she said quietly. "DevGru, SEAL Team 6. I was the first woman to pass the selection. I served for 8 years before being declared KIA in 2019. I've been undercover ever since, and right now, Admiral Hawthorne is the only person who knows where the 12 missing SEALs are being held. If he dies, they die." Davis digested this information silently. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Who are you calling?" Carmela demanded. "Hospital security. We're locking down the intensive care unit. No one is entering or leaving without permission. That won't stop a professional." "Then what will stop it?" Carmela's eyes were cold and gray-blue, like winter water. "Me." They returned to the hospital 18 minutes later. The intensive care unit floor was quiet. The lights were dimmed for the night shift. 2 Marines still stood at the Admiral's door, alert and armed. Carmela approached the nurse's station. The night nurse in charge, an elderly woman named Patricia, looked up in surprise. "Rose, you've been sent home." "I know," Carmela said, her voice shaking again. "The mask is back, but I forgot my jacket. Can I just get it from the break room?" Patricia frowned but nodded. "Hurry." Carmela passed the nurse's station, but instead of going to the break room, she slipped into the supply closet. Davis followed, watching. Inside the supply closet, Carmela's hands moved with blinding speed. She grabbed surgical gloves, a scalpel, sutures, hemostatic gauze, and a small bottle of lidocaine. She stuffed them into her jacket pockets. "What are you doing?" Davis whispered. "Prepare," Carmela said. "If someone attacks the Admiral tonight, we won't have time for a resuscitation team. I'll have to stabilize him myself." "You are a nurse, not a surgeon," Not. Carmela looked at him with eyes that saw things he couldn't imagine. I'm a combat medic with field surgery experience. I've performed thoracotomies in the back of a helicopter and cricotomies under enemy fire. I can keep him alive. Davis believed her. They left the supply room and nearly collided with Dr. Chen, who was reviewing charts at her post. Rose, Chen said sharply, I told you to go home. I'm sorry, Dr. Chen, Suddenly the alarm clock rang shrilly. All three turned toward the intensive care units. Alarm was emanating from Admiral Hawthorne's room. The Marines at the door were already moving, weapons drawn, rushing inside. Carmela ran. She burst into the room before Dr. Chen, before Davis, before anyone else. The Admiral was convulsing again, but this time it was different. This wasn't cardiac arrest. This was a neurological issue. And next to his infusion pump, adjusting the syringe port, stood one of the night shift nurses, a man Carmela had seen before but never spoken to. His name tag read, Morrison. Morrison looked up as Carmela entered. His eyes widened with recognition and calculation. Then he ran. He lunged for the door, pushing aside the Marines with surprising force. One Marine grabbed him, but Morrison twisted, hitting the Marine in the throat with a precise blow that instantly knocked him down. Stop him, Carmela screamed. But Morrison was already in the hallway, racing for the emergency stairwell. Davis knocked him down 10 feet from the stairwell door. They fell hard. Morrison fought with the trained efficiency of a man with serious combat experience. He elbowed Davis in the ribs, twisted, and reached for something in his pocket. Carmela was on him before he could get it. She hit him with a knee strike that would have made her instructors proud, driving her knee into his solar plexus with such force that he was lifted off the ground. Morrison collapsed, gasping for breath, and Carmela pinned him face down, twisting his arm behind his back in a hold so painful, he screamed. Don't move, she said quietly, her voice perfectly calm. Or I'll dislocate your shoulder, then your elbow, and then I'll start on the other arm. Davis stared at her. The Marines stared at her. Dr. Chen, who had appeared in the hallway, stared at her, trembling. The incompetent nurse had just neutralized a trained assassin in 3 seconds. Morrison spat blood onto the floor. You're dead, Valkyrie, he hissed. You and everyone you care about. The ghost ship knows you're alive. They will come for... Carmela increased the pressure on the pain hold. Morrison screamed and went silent. Take him to security, Carmela ordered the Marines, her voice carrying a commanding authority that compelled them to obey without question. And check his pockets. He was reaching for something, probably a weapon or a cyanide pill. The Marines picked Morrison up and dragged him away. Carmela turned and ran back to the Admiral's room. She checked the infusion pump. Someone had injected something into the line. She traced it. Potassium chloride, enough to cause hyperkalemia and cardiac arrest within minutes. She removed the infusion line, drew blood for an emergency potassium test, and started a new line with saline. Calcium gluconate 10 milliliters intravenously, she ordered, directed at no one in particular. He's hyperkalemic. We need to stabilize his cardiac membranes now or he'll stop. Dr. Chen, finally finding her voice, grabbed the medication and administered it without question. The Admiral's heart rate stabilized. The room fell silent, save for the beeping of the monitors. Dr. Chen slowly turned to look at Carmela Rose. Who the hell are you? Carmela met her gaze. The mask disappeared. Pravda stood in the middle of the intensive care unit, covered in the blood of the supposed killer, holding the Admiral's life in her strong, scarred hands. I'm the reason he's alive, Carmela said quietly. And if you want him to stay that way, you'll let me do my job. The hospital director's office was cold and unwelcoming at 3 a.m. Commander Rebecca Walsh sat at her desk, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who didn't introduce themselves. They didn't need to. Carmela recognized federal agents when she saw them. Dr. Chen stood to the side, arms crossed. Davis was there too, positioned near the door like a guard. And Carmela sat in the center of it all, still in her bloody uniform, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "Nurse Rose," Director Walsh began, her voice thick with controlled anger. "In the last 8 hours, you've subdued a violent admiral using techniques that incapacitated 6 trained personnel, performed CPR on a cardiac arrest with CPR-level precision, and physically subdued a killer using what witnesses describe as special operations tactics. Would you care to explain?" Carmela kept her eyes downcast, her voice soft. "I just did what I was trained to do, ma'am." "Trained by whom?" demanded one of the men in a suit. "Your nursing school records show average performance. No military service, no martial arts experience. But you moved like a Navy SEAL." Carmela didn't respond. The second man in the suit leaned forward. "Ms. Rose, or whoever you are, Admiral Hawthorne, Commander of Naval Special Operations. The man you neutralized, Jeffrey Morrison, is a former CIA operative. He wasn't here to steal medical supplies. He was here to complete an assassination attempt, and you stopped him as if you knew exactly what was going on." "I'm lucky," Carmela whispered. "No one's so lucky." The man in the suit snapped a photo. He slid the photograph across the table. "This is from security footage. Zoom in on your left eyebrow. This scar. It matches the description of the cameraman presumed dead in 2019. Commander Carmela Torres, DevGru, the first female Navy SEAL. The legend they called Valkyrie." Silence fell over the room. Carmela slowly looked up. The mask was still there, but cracks were showing. "Commander Torres died in Kandahar," she said quietly. "That's what the file says." "There's a lot written in the file," the man in the suit replied. "But Admiral Hawthorne called you by your call sign, and you responded. So I'll ask again. Who are you?" Before Carmela could respond, the door swung open. A Marine captain walked in with a clipboard. "Sir, we have a problem," Morrison said before taking a cyanide pill. Everyone turned. "He said there's a secondary command," the captain continued. "Ghost ship operatives. They'll attack the hospital at 0600 to eliminate the Admiral and anyone else with knowledge of Operation Night Watch." "That's in 90 minutes. Director Walsh turned pale. "Evacuate the Admiral immediately. Get him to safety." "He can't be moved," Dr. Chen interrupted. "His condition is too unstable. Moving him will kill him." "Then let's fortify this place," said the first man in the suit. He looked at the Marine captain. "How many security personnel do we have?" 12 Marines, 6 hospital security personnel versus a professional assassination team. We're outnumbered." The man in the suit turned to Carmela. "Commander Torres, if you truly are who you say you are, we need your help." Carmela stood slowly. When she spoke, her voice had completely changed. There was no tremor, no subordination. "All that remains is pure command." "I'll help," she said, "but we'll do it my way. No bureaucracy, no red tape. You give me operational control of this hospital's defense for the next 2 hours, or the Admiral dies and the ghost ship disappears." Director Walsh looked at the men in suits. The men in suits exchanged glances. Finally, the first one nodded. "You have tactical command, Commander. What do you need?" Carmela's blue-gray eyes hardened. "First, I want everyone on this floor cleared except essential personnel. Second, I want Davis and every combat-ready veteran in this hospital armed and positioned in the narrow passageways. Third, I want the Admiral moved to an interior room with no windows and only one entrance." She turned to Dr. Chen. "And I need you to trust me, because what's about to happen is going to be terrible, and I need a surgeon ready." Dr. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll get the operating room ready." "Good." Carmela looked at the Marine captain. "Position your men. They'll hit the south entrance. It's the weakest point. Light bullets anticipated a deadly dance, intertwining in an intricate pattern, but no one dared open fire until the cherished order was given. "We'll let the enemy go deep," the commander mused, "and then close the circle." "This is a death trap," the captain realized, "a real trap." "They expect resistance," Carmela corrected him, "so we'll present them with a target and then mercilessly destroy it." The surrounding officers exchanged knowing glances. "Commander, we absolutely need at least one prisoner for interrogation," one of them remarked. "I'll see to that," Carmela replied coolly. "But remember, if I have to choose between the prisoners and the Admiral's safety, I'll choose the Admiral." She moved toward the door but paused. "And bring me some body armor and a weapon. I'm not going to fight in scrubs with just a scalpel this time." 50 minutes passed. Carmela Rose was gone. In her place, dressed in someone else's tactical vest over her scrubs, a Sig Sauer P320 pistol at her hip and an M4 carbine slung across her chest, stood Commander Carmela Torres. Her light brown hair was pulled tightly into a military bun, not a single strand out of place. The scar above her left eyebrow, previously hidden, now stood out proudly, like a badge of honor. Davis stood beside her, also armed. Behind them, forming a defensive perimeter around the Admiral's new quarters, were 6 Marines. They were to guard the Admiral in a makeshift intensive care unit set up in a nondescript windowless storage room. "They'll be in fast," Carmela said, checking her carbine. 4 to 6 professionals with suppressed weapons. They'll use flashbangs to disorient the target, then eliminate anyone nearby. Standard Black Ops protocol. "How do you know?" Davis asked. "I've personally led this operation 12 times, Carmela replied quietly. "I know how they think." The radio crackled to life. "Commander, this is observation post. Movement detected. 3 vehicles, darkened SUVs, approaching from the south." "Copy," Carmela replied. "Hold your positions. No one opens fire until they're within range." She turned to Davis. "When it starts, it'll be lightning fast and loud. Stay behind cover. Aim for the hull. Don't hesitate. These aren't soldiers. These are mercenaries. They'll kill you without a second thought." "Roger." Carmela took a position from which she could command both the main corridor and the Admiral's chamber. Her heart beat steadily. Her hands were steady. This was what she was born to do. The lights went out. Emergency lighting came on, bathing everything in red. Somewhere below, an explosion shook the building. The south entrance was breached. "Contact!" The radio crackled. "Multiple enemy, moving down the main corridor. Fire!" Shots rang out, muffled rifle fire and the heavier bursts of Marine fire. Carmela waited. She heard footsteps on the tile. Clear. Professional. 3 figures appeared at the end of the corridor, weapons drawn, scanning the area. They spotted the Marines first. Muzzle flashes lit up the corridor. 1 Marine fell, then another. Carmela emerged from cover. She fired 3 rounds in quick succession. The first operative went down. The second took cover. The third turned toward her. Carmela fired 2 rounds, striking his body armor at an angle so the plates didn't overlap. He went down. "Left flanking," she shouted to Davis. They acted as one, as if they'd trained together for years. Davis covered the right, Carmela moved to the left, and they caught the remaining operatives in flanking fire. It was over in 30 seconds. 4 bodies, no prisoners. "Clear," Carmela called, scanning the corridor with her carbine. But her instincts screamed, "Not that simple." That was too easy. The ghost ship won't send just one command. Davis checked the ceiling. Suddenly, the ceiling above the Admiral's chamber exploded. 2 operatives descended through the breach, bypassing all their defenses, and landed directly in front of the door where the Admiral lay defenseless. Carmela lunged forward. She covered 10 meters in 4 seconds. But it wasn't enough. The operatives broke down the door. A flashbang exploded inside, and she heard Dr. Chen scream. Carmela burst through the doorway, performing a somersault, and immediately opened fire. The first operative turned to face her. She shot him twice in the face. The second held a rifle aimed at the Admiral's bed. Carmela couldn't fire. Dr. Chen stood behind him, so she didn't fire. She threw the carbine like a spear, hitting him in the shoulder, and then closed the distance before he could recover. She kneed him in the stomach, grabbed his gun arm, twisted, and broke his elbow with a sickening crack. He screamed and tried to reach for his pistol. Carmela threw him aside, tripped him, and brought him to the floor. Before he could even breathe, her Sig Sauer was pressed to his temple. "Don't move," she said calmly. The operative looked up at her, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Valkyrie," he breathed. "You were supposed to be dead." "I'm healed," Carmela replied. "Now tell me who sent you, or I'll shoot you in the skull and ask your partner." "He's gone. He's dead. That makes you my only source." The operative grinned, bloody teeth flashing. "A ghost ship leaves no witnesses. You know that." "Then it looks like you'll soon be a ghost," Carmela said, and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed in the small room. Dr. Chen screamed. Davis appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. But Carmela didn't kill him. The bullet hit the concrete next to his head. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Tell me, or the next one will go into your eye." The operative broke. The Admiral found something. Operation Night Rain, the locations of the dead drops. 12 Navy SEALs are being held for questioning. The ghost ship is cleaning up its tracks before going public. "Where is the intel?" "I don't know. He hid it before we attacked. That's why we needed him alive in the first place." Carmela pressed the barrel harder against his head. "Who's running the ghost ship?" The operative's eyes widened in horror, not from her, but from something far worse. "If I tell you, they'll kill my family. If you don't, I'll kill you right now." He broke. He whispered a name. Carmela's blood ran cold. The name the operative whispered changed everything. "Director Walsh," Carmela radioed, her voice shaking. "Full lockdown of the entire hospital, no entry or exit, and get those federal agents to the ICU immediately." "We have a bigger problem," Davis said, looking at her. "Who did he call?" "Later," Carmela replied, strapping the wounded operative's arms. She turned to Dr. Chen, who was slumped against the wall, shaking. "Are you okay?" Chen nodded, his head shaking. I've never seen anything like this." "Welcome to my world," Carmela said grimly. She checked the Admiral's vitals. He was still stable, somehow asleep despite the chaos, thanks to the sedatives. "Stay with him. Don't let anyone into this room except myself or Davis. No one. Understood?" "Understood." Carmela and Davis dragged the wounded operative into the hallway just as 2 federal agents arrived with their guns drawn. "Commander, what happened?" the first agent demanded. "Ghost ship sent 2 teams," Carmela reported. "We neutralized 7 operatives." This one spoke. She nodded at the prisoner. "You should hear what he said." "And what did he say?" Carmela looked at them, her eyes as cold as winter ice. "He said, 'The man in charge of Ghost Ship, the one who ordered the Admiral's assassination, is Vice Admiral Richard Keller, Deputy Chief of Naval Special Operations, the Admiral's right-hand man.'" The agents paled. "That's impossible," the second agent said. "Keller served in the Navy for 30 years. He's a traitor," Carmela interrupted. "And it's because of him that 12 Navy SEALs are currently being tortured in secret prisons. The Admiral found the evidence. That's why Keller tried to kill him." The first agent grabbed the phone. "I need to report this." "No," Carmela snapped. "If Keller has enough influence to send ghost ship operatives, he has enough influence to monitor communications. The moment you make that call, he'll know we're on his trail." "And what are you suggesting?" "Wait until the Admiral wakes up. Carmela replied. He's the only one who knows where the evidence is hidden. Once we get them, we can bring down Keller and his entire operation. And if Keller sends more operatives, then we'll kill them too, Carmela replied evenly. The Marines were securing the floor when Admiral Hawthorne's eyes opened. It was 8 in the morning. The golden California sun streamed through the undamaged windows at the far end of the hallway. The Admiral lay in his makeshift intensive care unit, surrounded by armed guards, medical equipment, and the woman who had saved his life 3 times in 12 hours. Carmela sat by his bed, still wearing her tactical vest over her scrubs. Her carbine sat against the wall within easy reach. "Valkyrie," the Admiral croaked, his voice weak but clear. "Admiral," Carmela replied. "Welcome back." He looked at her with eyes that had seen too many wars. "I thought you were dead. I needed everyone to think that after Kandahar, after what we found." She shook her head. "It was safer for everyone if Valkyrie died. But you're here now because you're in danger, and because 12 of our brothers are being held in secret prisons, tortured for information about operations that should never have happened." The Admiral closed his eyes. "Operation Night Rain." The operative confirmed it. "Keller is in charge of the ghost ship. He's eliminating everyone who knows about the secret prisons." "Not just Keller," the Admiral said quietly. "It goes higher. Joint Chiefs of Staff level. Possibly higher." Carmela felt the weight of those words. "How high?" "High enough that I couldn't operate through official channels. I had to hide the evidence where even our people couldn't find it." "Where is it?" The Admiral looked at her. "You remember the safe house in Coronado? The one we used for Team 6 briefings? The one that officially doesn't exist?" "Yes." "The evidence is there, hidden behind a false wall behind the armory. Discs, documents, recordings. Everything we need to expose Night Rain and bring everyone involved to justice, including Keller. Especially Keller." Carmela stood up. "Then we take them today, before he realizes you're alive and talking." "Valkyrie, wait." The Admiral grabbed her wrist with unexpected force. "Keller has eyes everywhere. The moment you go to that safe house, he'll know. He'll send everything he's got." "Let him send it," Carmela replied coldly. "I've been in hiding for 5 years. I'm not going to hide anymore." The Admiral studied her face. "You've changed." "I'm dead," Carmela said simply. "I'm not the same person who walked into Kandahar." "None of us are." Carmela gently pulled his hand from her wrist. "Rest, Admiral. I'll get the evidence, and then we'll destroy them all." She headed for the door, but stopped. "Sir, thank you for recognizing me, for telling me my call sign. If you hadn't done this, I might have stood by and let them kill you. I knew it was you the moment you touched me," the Admiral said. "Valkyrie always had the steadiest hands I've ever seen. Even when the world was crumbling, you never trembled." Carmela looked at her hands. They were completely still. "I'm shaking now," she admitted, "but only when I'm pretending to be someone else." 40 minutes later, Carmela and Davis were driving in a nondescript SUV south toward Coronado. 2 federal agents followed in a second vehicle. They contacted a trusted SEAL team leader, one of the few people in Naval Special Operations not affiliated with Keller. "This is crazy," Davis said, checking his carbine. "We're going to break into a classified facility to steal evidence against a vice admiral." "Not steal," Carmela corrected. "Recover. The evidence belongs to the admiral. We're just taking it." "You know Keller will guard this safe house." "I'm counting on it." Davis looked at her. "You want them to come?" "I want Keller to deploy his remaining assets," Carmela said, "because once they're gone, he'll have nothing left. He'll be exposed, vulnerable. Then we'll destroy him." They arrived at the safe house shortly after 9 in the morning. It looked like an ordinary beach house with faded blue paint and weathered patio furniture. There was nothing to suggest it was a SEAL team's operations center. Carmela walked to the door, entered the code, which looked like it should have been changed years ago, but apparently hadn't, and entered. Inside it was dark, dusty, clearly unused for months. "Check the rooms," Carmela ordered. "I'll handle the evidence." She went into the back bedroom. She pulled back a false panel and discovered the weapons room, just as the Admiral had described. A false wall, a hidden compartment. She pulled out 3 hard drives, a file folder, and a small digital recorder. "Got it!" she shouted to Davis. At that moment, the windows exploded. The flashbangs detonated in every room at once. The world went blank, and the sound hit like a physical slap. Carmela slumped behind her desk, her training overpowering her senses. She couldn't see, couldn't hear, but she could move. She drew her pistol and fired 3 rounds through the nearest window. No aiming, just suppressive fire. Her vision cleared enough to see 4 operatives bursting through the front door. Davis was wounded, clutching his ears, disoriented. The federal agents were pinned outside by sniper fire. Carmela was outnumbered, 4 against 1. She smiled. These weren't just any operatives. She recognized their gear, their movements. Former DevGru operatives. They knew how good she was, but they didn't know she'd improved. The first operative burst through quickly. Carmela led him. She pushed a table toward him, using it as a moving barrier, then vaulted over it and plunged her knife into the gap between his helmet and vest. He fell. The second operative fired. Bullets tore through the table. Carmela rolled to the left, recovered behind cover, and threw the knife. It caught him in the throat. 2 were down. The remaining 2 spread out. Professionally, carefully. They knew she was deadly. "Valkyrie," one of them called. "Keller says if you surrender now, he'll let you live." "Tell Keller I'm coming for him next," Carmela shouted back, "right after I kill you both." They came at her from both sides. She grabbed a digital recorder, a small, heavy metal one, and threw it at the operative on the left. It hit his night vision goggles, shattering them. He stumbled, blinded. The operative on the right fired, bullets ripping through the wall where Carmela had been a second ago. She was already moving, circling him with inhuman speed. She hit him in the kidney, grabbed his rifle, and using his own momentum, slammed him into the wall. His helmet cracked against the drywall. She disarmed him, flipped the rifle over, and fired 3 bullets point-blank into his vest. The last operative. His night vision was destroyed. He was firing erratically. Carmela fell, rolled, and was within his reach. She grabbed the barrel of the rifle, pointed it upward, and slammed the heel of her hand into his chin, snapping his head back. He fell with a thud. 4 bodies, 60 seconds. Carmela stood in the ruins of the safe house, breathing hard, blood on her hands that wasn't hers, and the evidence still in her grip. Davis groaned, rising. "What the hell happened?" "I happened," Carmela said quietly. She helped him to his feet. Federal agents entered cautiously, looking at the carnage. "Commander," the first agent said, his voice, "it was necessary." Carmela interrupted. "And we need to move. Keller knows we have evidence. He'll go underground or escape. Then we'll arrest him immediately." "No," Carmela said. "We'll expose him publicly so he can't disappear into the bureaucracy." She held up the digital recorder. "The Admiral said there are recordings. If we can get this to the media, to Congress, to everyone, Keller is finished." The second agent nodded. "I have contacts at the Washington Post. If the evidence is as damning as you say, it's worse than damning. This is the end of everyone involved in Operation Night Rain." She looked at the bodies on the floor. Former brothers, men who chose money and power over honor. "Finish this." Vice Admiral Richard Keller was arrested at 4 o'clock that afternoon in his office at Naval Special Warfare Command. NCIS agents carried out the arrest, and the Washington Post was already running the headline, "Secret Prison Scandal. High-ranking naval officer implicated in illegal detention of U.S. service members." The evidence from the safe house was devastating. recordings of Keller ordering the assassination of an admiral, documents showing the locations of 12 Navy SEALs held without trial, financial reports proving that the ghost ship operation was being funded through shadow operations. By 6 p.m., the story had gone viral. By 8 p.m., 3 members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff had resigned. By 9 that night, Carmela Torres was standing in Admiral Hawthorne's hospital room, watching the news on a small television mounted to the wall. "It's over," the Admiral said from his bed. He was still weak, still recovering, but alive. "It's not over," Carmela corrected. "It's just begun. Those 12 SEALs must be found. The secret prisons must be dismantled, and all those involved must be brought to justice." "Agreed." The Admiral looked at her. "That's why I recommend you for reinstatement. Full rank, full honors, Commander Carmela Torres, back from the dead." Carmela shook her head. "I can't." "Why?" "Because I've been dead for 5 years, sir. I've built a life in the shadows. The people I care about think I'm lost. Returning means answering questions I don't want to answer." "You saved my life," the Admiral said. "You exposed the biggest scandal in the history of naval special operations. You deserve recognition." "I deserve peace," Carmela said quietly. She removed her tactical vest, revealing a blue medical suit underneath. "And maybe I've found it. To be a nurse, to help people without violence." "But you're not just a nurse," the Admiral insisted. "You're a Valkyrie, you're a warrior." "I'm both," Carmela said, "and maybe that's okay." Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway with a clipboard. "Commander Torres, can I speak with you?" Carmela followed her into the hallway. "I've reviewed your personal file," Chen said. "The real one. DevGru, 8 years of operations, classified missions I'm not cleared to read about. You're a legend." "I'm a survivor," Carmela corrected. "You're also the best emergency nurse I've ever seen," Chen continued, "and this hospital needs people like you, people who understand what our patients have been through." Carmela looked at her, surprised. "I'm offering you a job," Chen said, "not as Carmela Rose, but as yourself. Commander Torres, military liaison and trauma specialist. We get veterans coming in every day with invisible wounds. They need someone who understands who was there." "You want me to stay?" Carmela asked slowly. "I want you to stop hiding," Chen replied. "You've earned the right to be yourself." Carmela considered. 5 years in the shadows. 5 years of pretending to be less than she was. "I'll think about it," she finally said. 3 days later, Admiral Hawthorne was stable enough to be transferred to Bethesda for further treatment. All 12 missing SEALs had been found, and recovery operations were well underway. Vice Admiral Keller and 7 other officers were in custody awaiting court-martial, and Carmela Torres stood in the hospital parking lot next to her battered Honda Civic, filled with the few belongings she had accumulated as Carmela Rose. Davis approached, no longer in his security uniform, but in civilian clothes. "So you're leaving?" "Yes," Carmela confirmed. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere far away. Somewhere where I can understand who Carmela Torres is supposed to be now." Davis handed her a card. "If you ever need anything, a job, a recommendation, someone to watch your back, call me." Carmela took the card and studied it. "You're a good man, Davis. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for saving us all." She got into the car and started the engine. But before she drove away, she looked up at the hospital building where she'd spent 8 months pretending to be someone she wasn't. Maybe Dr. Chen was right. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Carmela pulled out her phone and made a call. When the line was established, a voice said, "This is Commander Carmela Torres." She continued, addressing the person who was obviously on the other end of the line. "I'm requesting reinstatement to active duty. However, I have no desire to return to operational work or training. My new purpose is to pass on to the next generation of Special Forces soldiers the knowledge that helped me survive the harsh conditions I lived through. A question followed on the other end of the line. Yes, Carmela answered with a slight smile. Valkyrie is coming home. She hung up and, leaving the Naval Medical Center behind her, walked out for the last time. Behind her, the sun set over San Diego, painting the sky with wondrous hues of gold and crimson. The road ahead of her led into darkness, but fear no longer tormented her heart. She was a warrior. She was a ghost. She was a nurse. And now she was going to find herself again. And that was enough. 6 months later, at the Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hayes stood before a group of 40 special warfare candidates. It was the first mixed class in the program's history. Today, a voice said from behind her, you'll learn about combat trauma care. The candidates turned. A woman entered the room. She was short, perhaps 6 feet 2, with light brown hair pulled back into a tight bun. She wore a Navy uniform with a commander's patch. A thin scar crossed her left eyebrow. I'm Commander Carmela Rose, she introduced herself, her blue-gray eyes scanning the room with the piercing intensity of someone who's seen too much war. Call sign, Valkyrie. I was the first woman to successfully complete Special Forces training. I served with DevGru for 8 years. I saved lives in war zones from Afghanistan to Syria and eliminated the enemies of our country in over 40 missions. A profound silence fell over the room. But the most important thing I've ever done, Valkyrie continued, was learning not to fight, but to choose when to be a healer, not a warrior. Because ultimately, our job is not to take lives. Our job is to preserve them. She smiled, and the smile transformed her face, softening the stern sternness almost to kindness. So here we go. Pair up. Today we're going to learn how to perform needle decompression in the field. And trust me, by the end of this course, your hands will be steady enough to do it in the dark under fire with your best friend bleeding out next to you. The candidates, full of enthusiasm and focus, began to pair up. And Carmela Rose, the Valkyrie, was already among them, passing on to a new generation the knowledge of how to survive the wars she herself had narrowly escaped. She was home. The end. This story reminds us that heroes come in many forms. Sometimes they wear uniforms and medals. Sometimes they wear scrubs, moving in the shadows. But they always stand between the innocent and the darkness, refusing to retreat. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories of courage, sacrifice, and the indestructible human spirit. What do you think of the Valkyrie's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.